All right, so today we're going to be taking a look at this guy right here. This is the Team Group T-Force Vulcan G SSD. This is a relatively new entry-level 2.5-inch SATA SSD, and it's going to be available in 512 and 1 terabyte variants. The Vulcan G is going to be aimed at like your budget-oriented builder out there. So let's take a closer look at this thing and determine if it's worth it for you. Now, for transparency, Team Group did send this my way to check out for you guys, but as I'm sure you guys already know, this will not impact my review in any way. So let's start by talking specs, which are probably the most important thing when it comes to SSD. The Vulcan G uses TLC flash memory to store data. TLC stands for triple layer cell, and it's the most common memory type as of right now. As of making this video, it's the most common amongst all types of SSDs. This is premium SSDs, these are budget SSDs. It's just the most common ones as of, again, right now. And so basically, without making NAND complicated, for those of you who don't know what that means, TLC memory stores 3 bits worth of data per cell. This is beneficial over something like SLC or single layer cell memory, and MLC or multi/2 layer cell memory, as you can store more data in less space, which means you get more storage for less money. But since SLC and MLC have less bits of data to worry about per cell, they are faster, they are more reliable, and they do typically last longer, as each cell is only being written to once or twice per write instead of 3 times like TLC. In the grand scheme of things, it's really not that big of a deal, as the 512 gigabyte version, so this version right here that I have in my hand, is actually rated to last up to 120 terabytes written, or roughly 32 gigabytes written every single day over 10 years. To put this into perspective for you guys, this is like downloading and then deleting Grand Theft Auto 5 every single day for over 3 years. So GTA 5 is a 90 gigabyte game, and why you would just constantly download it and then delete it and then download it and delete it, I have no clue, but just to give you perspective, like, you'd have to download a game that large in order to potentially kill this within its 3-year warranty. Keyword here is going to be theoretical though, because these typically last a lot longer than what they warranty them for. The controller that's going to be used for the Vulcan G drives is going to be the Silicon Motion SM2258 XT controller, which is actually a super popular controller among budget SSDs. 2 models that you guys might be a little bit more familiar with are the ADATA SU650 and the Crucial BX500. Now, the problem that comes with this actual controller is going to be that this controller does not have DRAM, and instead it uses something called SLC caching. And basically, SLC, as I mentioned before, is going to be much faster than TLC, and so by implementing like this SLC caching scheme, it helps kind of like mimic what DRAM would do for your drive. It certainly gets bogged down much quicker than drives that do include DRAM, and performance will drop once the drive gets closer to being full. So that said, let's talk about performance now. The Vulcan G is rated for read speeds of up to 550 megabytes per second and write speeds of 500 megabytes per second. These numbers are going to be pretty typical amongst 2.5-inch SATA SSDs, as this is basically like fully saturating the current capabilities of SATA 3.0. Even if you had a drive with DRAM, you won't really get any faster read and write speeds than this. And instead, with DRAM, you get more consistent read and write speeds. The drive is also rated for 4K random read speeds of up to 285 megabytes per second and 4K random write speeds of up to 245 megabytes per second. This spec is more important for like your day-to-day use, such as if you had this as like your OS drive. And for the most part, these numbers are perfectly acceptable as long as you're getting this drive for the proper pricing, which we'll talk more about in just a second. Now, my testing for the performance of this drive included testing 2 other SSDs. So along with this drive here, I also tested the Samsung 850 EVO 500 gigabyte variant. I've had this one for a while, and then I also tested the SanDisk Plus model that they have, and I've had that for a while as well. This would be technically, the Vulcan G is kind of like supposed to be smacked right in between them, based on like what the controller specs and so forth that those drives have. I did use the same settings in Auto Disk Benchmark as fellow YouTuber Tech Tester, so that you guys have more results to compare my results to, as she does a ton of SSD reviews on her channel. So I will go ahead and I will leave a link to her latest SSD reviews down in the description box below, and just so you guys have, again, some resources to compare the results I had with hers. Anyway, for larger file sizes, such as if you were transferring large video files, we found the Vulcan G to push their theoretical limits pretty well. Max read speed capped out at 534 megabytes per second, while the max write speed during the benchmark capped out at 483 megabytes per second. The Samsung 850 EVO had a max read speed of 531 megabytes per second and max write speed of 487 megabytes per second, which is basically identical to this drive right here. As for the small block testing, the Vulcan G again pushed its rated theoretical limits pretty well, coming in at 266 megabytes per second for its 4K random read test and 229 megabytes per second for its 4K random write test. This compares to the Samsung 850 EVO, which swung in at about 272 megabytes per second for the 4K random read and 248 megabytes per second for the 4K random write. Now, while these tests paint a decent picture of the general usage for this drive, it really doesn't show you how the Vulcan G reacts once the SLC caching is filled up. So I did a little bit more testing and I transferred a ton of files to it at once. And what I found was that if the drive is empty after transferring about 130 to 150 gigabytes of data, the SLC caching will be saturated and write speeds will tank. Absolutely tank to between 10 megabytes per second and 80 megabytes per second. Just kind of bobs back and forth. Once the drive is about half full, the SLC caching seems to saturate at about 60 gigabytes of transfer data. And due to how SLC caching works, performance will continue to dwindle as you fill up the drive. This is going to be the downside of SLC caching over DRAM. And in comparison, even while transferring 461 gigabytes of data to my Samsung 850 EVO 500 gig version, it did not experience this issue at all. The Samsung 850 EVO was at the same exact write speed throughout the entire test. So, while DRAM is far better than SLC caching, and I would prefer to have a SSD with DRAM over having an SSD that has SLC caching, I do think for the right price, a drive like this, so a drive like the Vulcan G, can be useful. Again, it's going to have to be the right price, which is going to be the tricky part for these SSDs as prices are dropping across the board, including the drives that have DRAM. So in the event that you're able to get like a DRAM-less drive like this one that has SLC caching, at a super good discount, maybe like between 25 to 40% off compared to budget drives with DRAM, I think that this would be a great secondary drive for games, documents, and stuff like that. I would not try to use this for video editing at all, or any tasks that would require large data sets to be written to this drive consistently, as it will likely wear this drive out much faster than an SSD that does have DRAM on it. Go ahead and hit that like button if you enjoyed the video, the sub button if you loved it, and check out my other content that should be popping up somewhere on this screen right now. If you have any questions about this drive in particular, or any drives that you want me to check out, drop them in the comments below, or drop them in our community Discord, which there's also a link to that in the description box below. Thanks so much for watching, and you'll see me in the next one. That was awful. That was awful.